All right, in this episode of the Lighthouse Freedom Podcast, we are going to talk about the bitch voice versus your boss voice, which one to listen to and how it'll serve you. All right, so let's get into this one. This is a fun topic. It's one that'll, may cause emotions to rise a little bit. But we're talking about you essentially you have two voices, right? You have the boss voice, and then you have the little bitch voice. And before we go any further, I do just want to clarify. We're talking about the bitch voice being that voice that's telling you no. The bitch voice that's telling you can't do something, you can't solve for that, you can't move forward. It's that fear, right? And so which one do we want to listen to? And we talk a lot, the purpose of this entire podcast is to, just breathe a lot of motivation into people, breathe a lot of tactical stuff and content into folks that are maybe on the fence about, stepping forward into something that scares them, whether that's something within their family, something within, parenting, something within business partnerships, a lot of tough stuff. But, there's two voices that we all have, and it's not, and when we say bitch voice, it's not to be derogatory. It's just that voice of like, wait a minute, but you're not equipped, right? Yeah. Wait a minute, you can't. And let's talk about which one we want to listen to, and maybe more importantly, where those voices come from.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack, right? Yeah. And the bitch voice is also a voice that says, I'll start tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Like in addition to the fear thing, a lot of that bitch voice is like, I have time, I can get that. I can do it tomorrow. And I think one of the ways to stop, most people are listening to their bitch voice. And if you're offended, we keep saying that word, it's probably because you're listening to the bitch voice too often in your life. Yep. And we've all been there, and we've all succumbed to that voice. Yeah. In our lives.
At times, for sure.
That's how you understand that there's a difference. And once you become the watcher of your thoughts instead of the reactive response to the emotional stimulus that your thoughts create, right? Yeah. And you become the watcher, you have the ability to then to view these two voices, and you actually can see the dialogue going on in your head. It's kind of a weird, it's a little bit of a higher level consciousness thing to explain through, right? But if you can sort of elevate out of your own head and then watch the conversations and the thoughts that are happening, now you can start to look and see the voices, and they actually kind of exchange with each other. Yeah. And a lot of time that bitch voice is much more dominant because it comes from a place of comfort. Yeah. And that's why the voice is more dominant, because we feel more comfortable with what that voice is telling us to do. Yeah. Right? It's the boss voice is typically pushing you through pain, uncertainty, discomfort. It's pushing you into those things which we naturally have been told to avoid, right? That comes back to this whole deep-rooted beliefs things. It's avoid the uncomfortable, right? Yeah. Fear, failure is a bad thing. Those types of things, which people have just rooted in their subconscious, naturally makes them avoid that boss voice. Yeah. And what I'll say is, I had a recent example with this, and I've dealt with the bitch voice. It never goes away. No, regardless of whatever level you go to. I think that's the cool thing, is like, it doesn't matter what level you're on. You look at these people, these very, very high achievers, and you and I look up to a lot of these same guys. Yeah. And they talk about dealing with the same thing. Yeah. Every day they want to just do the more comfortable thing. Yeah. But they choose not to. Who talks about this a lot is David Goggins. Yeah. And his book just came out today. I got an Audible credit because I purchased it a while ago and it finally came out. I'm looking forward to reading it. But talk about somebody who just destroys that inner bitch voice. Yeah. Right. And I was saying I had a recent experience with this. I had set out to double my income every year for the last 4 years, and I've been successful in doing that. And this year coming up, doubling is kind of a big number. Sure.
We talked about this last time at the office. Yeah.
Yeah. And this was like a couple weeks ago, and I caught myself saying, well, dude, if you don't double it, it's not a big deal. Like, you've had a lot going on this year. I had, another baby. We're in a recession. Like, the economy's rough. Like, if you don't double, it's okay. Like, if you hit the same number, you're still doing pretty good. Yeah. And I caught it. Yeah. I was at the gym. Yeah. I was at the gym, and sometimes I put headphones in at the gym and I don't actually listen to anything just because I don't want to fucking talk to anybody. But I just like to listen. I listen to myself. Yeah. It's weird.
Dude, I've done the same. There's nothing playing.
Yeah. Don't fucking talk to me. I got my headphones in, but I'm not actually listening.
Right. I do the same thing.
I just think about things. And I was watching that conversation happen. And then the second I got home, and I've learned to use the bitch voice as a trigger. Mm-hmm. So now when you hear that voice start to go back on what you know you need to do, and that bitch voice starts to kick in, you use that as the stimulus to go forward into the uncertainty and what it's kind of telling you not to do the opposite.
Yeah.
That takes training. It takes discipline, and I'm still working on it. Like it's a progress thing, and it's a muscle that you have to build in order to go against that. Like you have to build that muscle. So the first thing I did when I went home was I wrote my new number at the bottom of my whiteboard, and I started mapping out how I'm going to get there. Like, these are all the deals I need to close. This is what needs to happen in order to get there. And, I felt way better after. That's the thing. You always feel better.
I love it.
After you listen to the boss voice, even though it sucks in the moment.
Yeah. I love it. And I think that I love that. And I was actually sitting here with you at the office as we're talking about some content a couple weeks ago. And you kind of hinted at where you were in your mind as you're thinking about doubling next year. And you weren't talking specifically about doubling your assets. You were talking specifically about doubling your take home. Like, what's your cash flow next year? What's going in your pocket? I talk to guys and coaching guys and even business partners about gross versus, top line, bottom line. And they'll always ask me, do you mean gross sales? I'm like, I'm never talking about gross sales ever. Take the number out. It's about what you actually made. Right. And so that's what you were trying to solve for. How does Chad King go from X to Y and doubling? And even then I could kind of couldn't read your mind, but I could see you were like, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do it because it's kind of becoming a big number, but like, I know I want to, all that stuff. Like, and I could see like a little bit of that bitch voice coming up.
I still don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure it out.
But you will.
Yeah.
And that's listening to, again, like the bitch voice or the boss voice. You're going to figure it out. FIO, figure it out. Yep. I think too, I want to touch on how that impacts you as men, specifically in your relationships, right? Because we have a boss voice and a bitch voice in our relationships. And, recently, you talk about triggers. Recently, something came up with Shannon and I, and like I was triggered. And I kind of went into like what men will do. And I kind of went into that like pouty, like I didn't like something that she said, or it just made me react funny to something. And we have two choices, right? And we train ourselves to do this. We have two choices in that moment. You can either listen to the boss or the bitch. Okay. What our wives and spouses deserve is the boss. And that's not in some overly masculine way. It's like they deserve you to lean into whatever that is, lean into the trigger, and don't listen to the bitch voice. The bitch would have made me this whiny little baby about the situation, about the conversation, what became an argument. Well, the boss voice is going to tell you, okay, put it aside, think for a second, reset. What's really at work here? What's really at play? And when we can do that, man, what's on the other side of that is fucking amazing. And your family gets the reward, right? Like they get the better version of Houston because I didn't listen to the bitch voice. Old version of me, bitch voice, would have like, again, just pouted for a whole day. I would have stayed silent. I would have gone cold shoulder. But like and the reason I bring that up is I think that it's very applicable both in business and in our relationships, right? Two voices are at play. You've got to listen to the one that's going to serve you rather than the one that's going to hold you back.
Yep. No, couldn't agree with you more. I think what you're talking about too is the boss voice is that of one that has emotional control.
Sure.
And like that has that, it's dangerous and it has that fire, but it's under control. And because there's going to be triggers all over the place.
Yeah.
Stressors, especially when you're, an entrepreneur, or you're creating your own economy, like we're talking about, like there's going to be things you can't control that go wrong.
Right.
And your life is a direct reflection of how you respond to those things. And that boss voice and bitch voice, once you start to realize it in your head, you'll see it almost all the time. It's all day long. It's running.
Yep. And
the boss voice is what you're talking about, which is 100% true, is the one that's under the control and is not reactive, but is very much in control of the emotions. Whereas, and I'm guilty of this too, sometimes like, we got a 4-month-old, but he is not sleeping through the night yet. And we were talking about this earlier. It's like, sometimes my wife and I are a little sleep deprived, and we'll get snappy with each other, right? And we're like emotionally reactive. Like something happens we don't like, or she says something I don't like, or I say something she don't like, and we'll like snap at each other. Yeah. And that's really, it's not having that emotional control and being centered enough to like control that initial voice that comes at you. Yeah. And I think the other thing you said too is like, you know, you can pout all day long or compartmentalize and just kind of sulk and wallow in something that maybe didn't go your way and just let that bitch voice just dominate your entire day. Yeah. There's like an analogy that's out there that talks about if somebody deposited $86,400 in your bank account, right? And then somebody took $10 out or somebody took $30 out. Would you just throw away the rest of the $86,370? Would you just throw away the rest of the money? Because you have 86,400 seconds. Right. And if some external emotional stimulus took 30 seconds of your life and it pissed you off, and you let it ruin your day, that's exactly what you just did. Yep. And so true. There's a lot of people that are, and I'm guilty. I've thrown days away. Like we're not here saying that we've got it all mastered, but we are here saying we have figured out these lessons to the point of being able to talk about them and explain them enough to know that you got to start to master these things, or you will be you're going to be a slave to the bitch voice for the rest of your life. Right. And then what you're going to do is you'll find company, because misery loves company. So you'll find other people that are slaves to that voice. Then you'll find yourself sitting around a table with a bunch of losers, you know, drinking, getting drunk on the weekends and talking about how shitty your job is that you're going to on Monday. And, and then it's much harder to get back on the path because now you're so far down the rabbit hole. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot on that, and I don't know how much longer we want to go on this, but I've seen so many people get trapped, and we're going to talk about what the ego can do in trapping you and keeping you kind of in prison in certain situations. But this one thing, listening to bitch versus boss, it can change everything, right? Like, again, I bring Shannon up into this one because we've talked about exposure to like the hot and the cold and all of that. And dude, she tested me. This was last week because I was like, I'm going to do 3 cold exposures a week and I want them to be pretty raw, pretty intense. And we put a pool in like right before the winter came and we kept it uncovered. So it's like, it's right there. It's in the backyard. It's accessible. You know, there's nothing holding me from doing it. And we just watched this episode on Limitless or called Limitless. And it's all of the long-term benefits of like cold exposure and exposure to heat 174 and up, and doing that incrementally 3 times a week and changing it out, and how your body's going to respond with fighting inflammation, and just all of the like long-term rewards of getting into that are pretty massive. And so we finished up, and like I had not been doing the cold showers and stuff for a while. I kind of got away from it. And I was like, I'm going to do this 3 days a week, and I'm just going to go get in the pool, and it's going to be cold. And I waited like 2 days, and she's like, hadn't seen you in that pool. And I was like, oh shit, bitch voice took over. And I was like, okay, I got to go get in. And dude, I sat like, I was in the kitchen looking at the pool, and I'm like, okay, like literally this seems so silly, but it's real for me. Like the whole family's watching. Like, is dad going to go do this or is he going to bitch out? Yeah. Well, it's obvious. Like I went and I got in the pool. We looked at it on the app. It was 44 degrees. It was miserable, but it was like 3 minutes of misery. Yeah. But I got out, and again, it seems so silly probably to a lot of listeners, but there's a lot of value in that. Like going to do it. Listen, which one do you listen to? And how good did you feel after?
I feel amazing. Yeah.
You always feel better after.
Awesome. Yeah, because you're on the other end of it. It's something, there's a lot of resistance. I don't want to do it. Like that's not fun, but the benefits outweigh that not fun.
You come out a better you come out a more of a human being. Like you come out a better person.
Feel alive.
You did. Yeah.
It's euphoric. Yeah.
And I think you said something too that I want to touch on before we wrap up the boss versus the bitch voice, because Shannon, who's your fiance now, and going to be your future wife, was kind of like your accountability partner because you told her. And I think you don't have to do this alone. We talk a lot about, last season we talked about building your team. We talked about partnering up with people. And even in this situation, although that conversation is internal, you can solicit external accountability partners, right, to help hold you accountable to listening to your boss voice. So you telling your wife or future wife that you wanted to do that, now she tests you a little bit and says, I hadn't seen you in that pool yet. You could respond two different ways to that. You can get super defensive and say, something crazy to her, like, well, when was the last time you get on the treadmill? What are you talking about? Like you could, you could get real defensive.
Yeah.
If you had been listening to your bitch voice, that's probably what you would have done. But listening to your boss voice, you're like, she's right.
Yeah.
Like she's right. And find yourself somebody who can hold you accountable.
Yeah.
Because I think that, I think having a partner that can hold you accountable makes it easier.
Yeah.
It's because it's not all on you.
Absolutely.
My wife does that all the time. I struggle to hit my macros. I would track our macros.
Yeah.
And I'm a relatively thin guy trying to put on weight. It's not as easy as people think. Put on weight. Everybody's like, it's nice being skinny. It's pretty hard. I got to eat like 3,500 calories a day.
Yeah.
And my wife presses me because she'll see that I'm not eating the amount of meals that I need to eat.
Yeah.
And she says, did you hit your macros today? And sometimes I'll snap back because I know I didn't. Yeah. And I kind of listen to it, like I skipped a meal. Yeah.
Yep.
And having that accountability partner to help you with your boss and bitch voice, get one.
Yeah.
Get one, because that voice is tough. And when you have somebody that can help push you,
hold you to it.
Yeah, you might need it.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's an ongoing process. And I think the last thing I'll say is just remember that it's okay if the bitch voice wins every once in a while. It's all right. You're playing. You're a human. You're human. But don't get in this self-perpetuating cycle where you continually give yourself so much grace that you're just not even listening to the boss voice, and you're saying, you know what, I'm a human being. It's okay. Like I'll have this cheat meal, and then I won't go to the gym, and then now it just becomes your lifestyle, and now you're just constantly giving yourself like
You've created a habit of the bitch voice.
Correct.
And that's where you'll stay.
Yeah, but just give yourself a little grace, especially in the beginning, and know that it's a muscle and you're building it just like in the gym. It takes time. And every time you listen to that boss voice, you're flexing that muscle one more time.
Yep.
And the more you flex it, the more that it grows.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.